With the postseason just weeks away and Miami's place in the standings still very much up in the air, which teams would be the best potential matchup for Miami? Plus, what's the latest status on Kevin Love and Jaime Jaquez? And which role players in Heat history would be the best fit on this current roster? We answered that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, it's longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. If you haven't heard already, on April 5th, we will be holding a watch party for the Heat's game in Houston. We're going to be doing that at the Taurus in Coconut Grove. The response to this has been really exciting, and we can't wait to meet some of you, watch a Heat game, throw back some beers, and have some fun. Again, April 5th at the Taurus in Coconut Grove for Heat Rockets. Game starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. We really do hope that you can come by. We'll get to some injury news, and then later we're going to do a draft of players from past Heat teams that we think could help them this season. I think that'll make more sense when we get to it. But let's start with a look at the playoff picture, taking a look at the Heat standings, or the NBA standings right now. The Heat, 39-32. They're in 7th place in the Eastern Conference. They're a half game back of the Pacers, so starting to gain ground on them a little bit there for the number 6 seed. That remains the goal, obviously, David, to climb out of this play-in tournament. But if it was starting today, the Heat would be playing the Philadelphia 76ers in the 7-8 matchup. And I think that's at least worth exploring here, because I don't know that we thought that Philly and Miami going into the year were going to be the two teams in the 7-8 matchup in this play-in tournament. And you and I think a lot of people is just sort of looking at the East standings. We're like, all right, eventually Orlando or Indiana will fall back, and Miami and Philly will kind of take their rightful places in the top 6. But that just hasn't happened yet, and there's no guarantee that it's going to. So what do you think about a potential Heat-Sixers play-in matchup? I don't think anybody's sort of expected this to be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you go with that caveat of if the series, if the playoffs began today or the play-in tournament began today, I guess it would still favor Miami. They would have home court for that, and on top of that, they wouldn't be facing Joel Embiid, so that would always be a great advantage for the team to hold. They're somewhat inconsistent, obviously, without Embiid, and considering he was having an MVP type season, that's unexpected either. So for Miami, I guess it benefits them that they'd be facing this team. I think they'd have a little bit of an advantage. Maxey is a great player, and I think he'd step up in the moment, but I think they can also be beaten on the edges, or the rest of the roster itself isn't particularly great. Tobias Harris is up and down.
That's putting
Miami. Yeah.
It's been mostly down.
Buddy Hield is okay. There's a lot of decent players there, but obviously without Embiid, it's very, very different. A very different team. So for Miami, that would be the ideal matchup, I think.
The latest reporting on Embiid is he could be back within 2 to 3 weeks, and that's kind of that's right on the border of when that play-in tournament might be. So to your point, David,
but he'd be coming back.
Yeah.
I mean, if he comes back from injury, he's going to be a little rusty, a little sluggish, a little out of game shape. He's still going to be dominant. But I like the overall. Look, again, you're absolutely right. The composition completely changes when Embiid's in play there.
And it's a meniscus tear, which is worth mentioning. So this is not like a situation that he's coming back from. He had surgery on it. Like the cardio and stuff, I don't know how much he's really working on that. I'm not, in the weeds in Philadelphia reporting there, but he's going to be rusty. There's a difference between, working out on the treadmill or the bike and being in an NBA game. And so if you're going to play Joel Embiid, because I think if Joel Embiid is back and he's even 80% of what he was prior to the injury, I think the Sixers are every bit a contender in the Eastern Conference because he was that good. But the chances of him being 80% of what he was before the injury, right when he comes back, is slim to none. And so if you're going to face the Sixers in a playoff type setting, the best time to face them would be in a 1-game play-in tournament in Miami, where you're forcing him to go on the road and do that kind of, maybe it could be his first game back for all we know. You know what I mean? And so that's assuming Philly stays in this play-in.
A lot of drama there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm not that worried about Philly in terms of a play-in game. Uh, I am a little bit more worried. And or let me ask you this question. Let's frame it of the teams that could realistically be in the play-in. And I don't even know if we're counting Orlando in that anymore. They're 3 games up on Miami, so I guess mathematically they could still drop in the play-in, but that does not look like it's going to be happening. So I feel like it's either Indiana or Philadelphia that Miami's going to be playing in that 7-8 matchup if the Heat do obviously stay in that play-in mix and not get up to number 6. But do you fear the Pacers more than the Sixers at this point?
I'd say so. I think the combustibility of Tyrese Halliburton and the overall depth on that team, I think, is still better. I mean, they acquired Pascal Siakam, who's given Miami problems in the past. So, they have got height and size of Miles Turner. He's not exactly the most dominant inside presence or anything like that, but he's still a good shot blocker when motivated. I think for a one-game situation, he'd certainly find the rhythm to be able to beat Miami. And Halliburton, despite the fact that he's been a little shaky coming back from injury and everything else like that, I'd still think that they might be favored against Miami, despite Jimmy Butler, despite their playoff success that the Heat has had and everything else. In a one-game situation, a team that can score 140 points versus a team that struggles to score 90 at times. Yeah, I think I'd look at the Pacers as a much more dangerous threat.
I'm with you, and I don't even think it's really much of a debate right now. So playoffstatus.com, who does like the playoff probability tracking, and it's a good website to find it. Basketball Reference has their version. The Ringer has a version, but we're going to use playoff status. They've got the Pacers at a 28% chance of getting the number 6 seed, and Miami, actually, after that Cleveland win, a 29% chance of getting the 6th seed. They have the Pacers 33% chance of landing at 7, the Heat 28% chance at staying at 7, and then they have a 23% chance for the Heat falling back to 8 and a 25% chance for the Pacers falling back to 8. And you ask yourself why, because I agree, like the Pacers have been the better team on balance all regular season. Now that does not, I'm not telling you that they're the better team, period. They've been better all year long than the Heat, and that's not debatable. They have a better record. That's how that works. But you look at the rest of their schedule, they have the second hardest schedule remaining in the Eastern Conference, and the Heat have the easiest one. And so if there's a team that's going to fall back, and Indiana's 6-4 in their last 10, Miami's 4-6, but with 11, 12 games left, if there's a team that's going to fall back, it might be the Pacers because their schedule is really hard. And you mentioned like the sort of combustibility of Tyrese Halliburton. Ever since he's been dealing with the hamstring injury, it's been very like trick or treat with him. Sometimes I guess the hamstring's okay. It can go off the way that he did against the Warriors the other night or have good games like that. And then other times it's not really there for him, and he'll go like 1 of 6 from 3-point range or something, and it's just sort of a weird kind of post-injury season for Halliburton, especially considering the way that it started. But still, if you're Miami, I think you're hoping to swap places with them.
Yeah, you just don't want TJ McConnell to go like 9 of 11 from the floor, killing everybody for the mid-range. He's gonna that's what happens with them. It's like there's a fluke occurrence, and this is why the danger of the play-in still looms large for Miami. Is that you over the balance of a 7-game series, I'd favor Miami over almost anybody except for the Denver Nuggets. But in a 1-game matchup, things can happen, and a player can go off against a suddenly inferior Miami defense or something like that. DeLon Wright can't contain McConnell, or who knows? Halliburton goes off. Pascal Siakam keeps getting to the rim.
I mean, there's a reason why,
or Nikola Jovic.
There's a reason why the Pacers did what they did in the in-season tournament. Is when you're talking about 1-game samples and sort of just win or go home type situations.
And they were at their peak at that point in time too.
Yeah. But like you mentioned before, their offense, they shoot so many threes and they play at such a fast pace. And if you get behind that pace early in the game, that thing can snowball on you, and the next thing you know, you're down 25 points because they're pushing the pace, they're making threes, and you can't even get your head on straight by the time that you realize what's even happening. And so the Pacers are sort of a team built for these win or go home scenarios, and so you don't want to see them. You just don't want to see them, regardless of whether or not Halliburton's been struggling and things like that. You mentioned the Siakam piece; it's an important thing there. We said that the Heat needed to go 8-5 before the Pelicans game. They've played 2 games. They're 1-1 in those last 2. They need to go 7-4, I think, over these final few games to get that number 6 seed and not worry about this play-in tournament at all. The Heat could be getting an important player back to the rotation soon that can help them do that. We'll tell you who it is and how they can help next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. What's Prize Picks? Well, it's America's #1 fantasy sports app. With over 3 million members, it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Why? Because it's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than the projections on 2 to 6 players, and you watch the winnings roll in. And believe me, it is easy. You can make an entry in less than 60 seconds. That's how simple it is. You make your picks, you submit an entry, bam, 60 seconds so you can get your winning started. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous amount of players and stat types. That's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And right now, if you go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA, you get a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA and get that first deposit match of up to $100. Don't forget Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. As a reminder, we are throwing that watch party at the Taurus April 5th, Heat Rockets. Make sure to come on through. As you know, also, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars, March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insights from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. I'm really enjoying the Marlins marketing strategy going into this, really leaning into baseball as the, this spelled, Spanish way in like sort of all their social media campaigning. So
yeah,
it's been,
I think they know where their bread is buttered down here in South Florida.
I think they do. Let's get on to the latest injury report. Kevin Love upgraded to questionable for Tuesday night's game against the Warriors with a heel bruise. He's missed the last 13 games, but this is the first time that he's been upgraded. It is questionable, which means he's questionable to play in the game. But again, he's not out. It's an upgrade. This is good news, right, David?
Yeah, I was sitting courtside against the Cavaliers, watching his former team get blown out on Sunday night. Look comfortable, and as you and I have said before, like I think it's just been very cautious approach from both Kevin and from the Heat. He's an older player. You need him. He's proven himself to be incredibly valuable in the games that he's been available as a rebounding big, a guy who can space the floor, a guy who can make those passes. Smart team defender, even though he's not as mobile as he once was. He was never particularly mobile, but, now he's certainly been hindered in that regard, but he's still very effective within the team concept that Miami plays defensively. So he's Miami's best backup center. For all the good that Thomas Bryant has been able to do as a replacement, he's not realistically the answer. You need Kevin Love out there. And so why not sit him for this amount of time? That's not to say that he wasn't severely injured, but I think he could have played, and we guessed that in the past that he probably could have played had it been a playoff situation. And I guess now that he's finally recovered and he's getting ready to get back into action, it's at the right time. He can get himself get going a little bit. The Warriors are a tough matchup for the Heat. I think they will be. But to have Kevin Love out there, a little size, a little rebounding, that helps Miami. Certainly gives them an opportunity to get back into shape. The same situation we were talking about with Joel Embiid. You don't want to throw him out into a playoff situation right away. So in this case, you can get him, let him warm up, let him get his energy back, his endurance going, and then he can slowly start ramping up towards the playoffs, and he can be the contributing factor that he was.
Kevin Love versus Steph Curry, maybe a little bit of a spark there for K Love. The old matchup, get one-on-one, get him isolated one-on-one in the perimeter against Steph again, just like in the NBA Finals. Throw him into the fire. Let's get him going.
That won't wind up.
Maybe it might not.
That won't go the way it did back in 2016.
No, maybe not.
I don't.
No, this is huge. If once he's able to come back, it's huge. Without Kevin Love, Duncan Robinson, and Tyler Hero, the Heat have had such a hard time spacing the floor around Jimmy and Bam. And I know people have been critical of Bam. We've been critical of Jimmy Butler a lot, or I have, I guess, on this show, not being able to deal with the double teams, opponents packing the paint more than ever. A big reason is because nobody cares about Patty Mills or Nikola Jovic on the perimeter. We're big Nikola Jovic fans around here, but nobody's closing out on him necessarily. Like, you need respected reputation shooters out there to space the floor, and it has been hard sledding without Duncan, without Tyler, and without Kevin Love. And Kevin Love by himself isn't going to replace all of that, but he's going to help. And that two-man game with Kevin Love and Jimmy Butler was thriving before Kevin Love went
Yes.
down with this heel injury. He has got such for the obvious like tactical reasons of Kevin Love on the perimeter creates more space on the inside near the paint for Jimmy Butler, and that's very important. I don't mean to overlook that, but also just the chemistry that those two guys have built over the last year and a half.
Yeah.
Kevin Love is maybe the best guy at throwing those entry passes on the team to Jimmy Butler in the low post. Like there's real like hard work chemistry that has developed there. And so you get Kevin Love anchoring that second unit when Jimmy Butler takes his rest midway through the first quarter, comes back in, Bam Adebayo sits down, Kevin Love comes in, and that two-man lineup has been really positive for Miami in a way that it just hasn't been with Thomas Bryant. It's been such a roller coaster with him. Orlando Robinson, that experience was brief and not all that productive. So getting Kevin Love in there as a steady contributor and a guy who just makes sense, is a value add basically every night, even if the three isn't going in, it's huge. The other guy here on the injury report was Jaime Jaquez Jr., who missed the last game against Cleveland with knee and ankle soreness, was a bit of a late scratch in that one compared to some of these other injuries that Miami's dealing with. He's been upgraded to questionable as he still deals with this knee and ankle soreness. And I think it's a good time to sort of have a conversation about Jaime Jaquez. It's not been awesome for him lately. The last 7 games, he's averaging 7.1 points on 34% shooting. The 3-point shot has basically gone in the toilet. He's shooting less than 17% on threes in that time. The rebounding is still there a little bit. He's still, facilitating and playmaking a little bit. I think his defense has been fine, but the Heat need him to score, especially with all these guys that have been out. And his last 7 games, again, 3 points against the Pelicans, 7 points before in the game before that, 9 points, 15 points, 2 points, 8 points, 6 points. Like he went off for 25 in Oklahoma City, and it was a really impressive game by him. And ever since then, it feels like he might have hit a wall. Now, I don't know if this ankle and knee was bothering him before that. Nobody knows how long this has been an issue for him. But you do wonder, you look at these stats and you're like, how long has he been really dealing with this? Because he hasn't looked, as springy as he did before either. So the fact that he had to sit out a game kind of makes a little bit of sense.
I think the absence of Love has hurt too. Like they had a good partnership going. For everything that you've mentioned about the two-man game between him and Jimmy, I think you saw the comfort between those UCLA sets. You also saw like you see Kevin Love look to get Jaime going in a way, and the fact that Jaime pushes the pace a little bit. Love as a trailer with a 3-point shot. If and also as a passing threat, like we've seen it before. Like Jaime is very mobile, a guy who makes those backdoor cuts. He's moving along the baseline. He's an open target in a way that that a lot of players can't find him necessarily. But Love does a good job of getting those entry passes into him, and it has been, I think, a fruitful partnership for them. So I think that's without him out there, it's been a little bit more of ISO situation where he has to create more on-ball scoring opportunities. And the book is out on him to a certain degree. I think everybody knows that he's a contributing player. I think the injury is certainly a factor. The fact that it's a long season, he's told us as much. It's a concern. He's just got to fight his way through it. But I think, again, I'm optimistic that if he gets that rhythm and finds that partnership again with Love or whoever shares the floor with him, I think it'll be a fruitful one. I'm looking forward to seeing how he handles playoff situations, because we keep hearing he's a battle-tested player. 4 years at college, he's been in these situations, and sure enough, during the regular season, we've seen evidence that he doesn't shy away from the moment. But what will that look like in 12 games when he's actually in a playoff or even in a play-in situation? Will he be able to step up to the challenge? Will he be able to find those same kind of scoring opportunities? And maybe will that shot finally start to fall?
Yeah. The shot is the big thing for me. That's like the red flag right now. He was not a good 3-point shooter at UCLA. That was sort of the knock on him going into the draft, right? And he shot like 31, 32% at UCLA, and he only had like one really productive year out of the 4. And so there was questions with that. And then he comes into the league. He shoots 37.5% from 3 in November, 39% in December. And you're like, oh, wow, maybe this wasn't an issue. But then it starts to drop. In January, he shoots 32%. In February, it's down to 26%, and it just keeps kind of going down. And lately, it's been in the toilet. So you hope that 3-point shot can come back around, that it's not streaky, because it looks good, when he takes it. I don't think it's a bad looking shot.
I think so, yeah.
But to your point, it's not like there's been a whole lot of guys setting him up. He's not like a pull-up three-point shooter, right? He's not a guy who's going to bring the ball up and
No.
just pull up. He needs to be assisted. He's a catch and shoot guy at this stage from three-point range, and so he needs somebody to set him up for those. All right, we're going to do something fun. It's like a Heat role player draft. We're going to go back in history to Heat role players and draft the ones we think could help this Heat team the most, whether they're filling in for guys that are hurt or maybe they're just a flat-out upgrade on the roster. We're going to do that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, we've talked about it before. BetterHelp is that opportunity for you to open up about some things that might be bothering you. You know, we all like to think that we have somebody that we can talk to, whether it's a coworker or a partner, or a loved one, family member, but they all bring in something to the situation. They're all connected to you. They're all somewhat biased in this. And as much as we'd like to think that they're giving us something that an opinion that we need to hear, it's probably not necessarily tainted, but it's certainly affected by their relationship with you. And so you want to be able to talk to somebody about a situation that has an unbiased opinion that can help you see a different perspective a little bit more clearly. And everybody's dealing with something, and it might be different. It might be something small that's just continuously building. It might be something big, somewhat even perhaps traumatic from an early childhood situation that you necessarily want to kind of work your way through. And if that's the case, and you're thinking about giving therapy a try, then give BetterHelp a try. It's really convenient. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire. They match you up with a therapist. If your schedule aligns, everything's perfect. If it doesn't, you find somebody else. If your schedule changes, bam, you find somebody new right away. It's that easy. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, give BetterHelp a try. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. And right now you get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. All right, let's do it. I don't know what we're calling this, but basically, we're going to draft players from Heat history as they were in their Heat primes, right? That way, and we're going to draft those players, the ones that we think could help this team right now. So we're taking those players, time machine, plop them onto this roster. We're looking for guys who can help. The catch is that they could not have made an all-star game while they were with the Heat. So we're basically just talking about role players. So no LeBron, no Dwayne Wade, no Chris Bosh. That was going to be too easy.
It out.
Right? It was too easy.
Yeah, you threw me off there. I was like, yeah, that's easy. It's just, it's Chris Bosh.
Nope,
He's
making
the
it hard.
Compliment to what they've got going on.
All right, since I made this game up,
it's got to be a bit of a challenge. Oh boy, I thought about a lot of different ways, and I'm probably forgetting a name that might be an obvious one. But to me, given what's looming for Miami past the play-in tournament, past everything else in terms of like size and the rebounding disadvantage that Miami gets put in, I went a little off the wall. I went with Rony Cycli, one of the better centers in Miami Heat history. You look at Miami's center rotation, it has not been great. You got Alonzo Mourning, obviously made all-star teams. You got Shaquille O'Neal, obviously made all-star teams. And since then, it's been kind of just fill-ins. Chris Bosh, obviously, he kind of emerged as a center eventually, but he's not eligible. So I went with Cycli. He was a great rebounder, polished scorer on the inside, very different flair. Sharp elbows, like that is certainly something you don't see very much of. Like that might be called a lot for fouls, but I thought he'd really be great at creating space and I think he was a good passer as well. He's not a frequent passer, but he was a capable one. So I kind of like the idea of having him going out there, throwing an elbow, being physical with a guy like Nikola Jokic, if that matchup in the finals presented itself, against Kristaps Porzingis, against Giannis, against other bigs that you'll face in the playoffs. I'd like to see Roning out there. And he's a hell of a
I like
DJ
the pick
from everything we
and so there's that. I don't mind the pick. I went with somebody else. I went with Shabazz Napier.
All right.
I'm kidding. I'm not going with Shabazz Napier.
Oh, Lord. Oh, my God. Whew. PTSD, man. It's only been 11 years.
I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm going with Hassan Whiteside.
I know, but it's too easy. I
What do you
thought
mean it's
about
too
it.
easy?
It doesn't work.
It
Doesn't
does.
work because you think no, you think size, rebounding, shot blocking. Yeah, sure, great. Until he kind of like forgets where he is and lets somebody just smoke
Okay,
him. Like first of all, he
understood.
can't
But
handle
when
Jokic.
when when Whiteside was in Miami, they tried to get him to switch on the perimeter and do these things, and he wasn't either willing or able to do it, or both. And that was what kind of got him into trouble, and basically ended up with him flaming out and getting traded to Portland. But I think on a team with this version of Bam, if you could find a guy who could play drop coverage like Whiteside, just protect the basket, and then allow Bam to roam, I think you would see Defensive Player of the Year stuff from Bam Adebayo.
So you'd start
And
him? You'd
I would
start him
start
alongside
Whiteside
Bam?
next to Bam because guess what? Bam takes threes now. So he could space the floor around Whiteside. I think I'm going Whiteside as with my first pick, and I can't believe I'm doing it. I am not one of these guys who's like, we didn't use Whiteside right. We should have never got rid of him. Go pick him up. I'm not, you know me. I'm not this guy. There's plenty of people like that in our comments. I am not that person. But I'm kind of looking and I'm like, you know what? If you give me Whiteside in certain matchups, you can have him go again. He was big and he was strong, man. He could go up against Embiid if you ended up playing him. He can hold his own against
Oh,
Kristaps
no.
Porzingis in the post. He'd be a good body just to throw out there against Jokic. Nobody could stop Jokic. Nobody. But at least he's
fair.
like,
No, that's fair.
at least he's out there, and then you can have Bam roaming and doing these other things. If you're looking at pass centers, and I'm not allowed to use Alonzo Mourning because he made an All-Star game. I'm not allowed to use Chris Bosh because he made an All-Star game.
Yes.
I'm going Whiteside. I'm going
There's not a lot
Whiteside.
of
All right,
options.
your pick. Your pick.
I thought Chris Anderson at one point. Like you
Thought
know,
about
a
him
guy,
too.
a
Is that
high
who you're
energy
going with?
guy, usage. No, I am not. Actually, with the concerns regarding Duncan Robinson, give me a guy who could put the ball on the floor, who was expected to become an all-star in Miami and never reached that potential, but eventually did. A guy who can
Oh.
stretch the floor and who might possess the finest
know who
shooting
you're
stroke I've
taking.
ever seen. Give me Glenn Rice. Yeah, Glenn Rice. Like he's a seamless fit right away. You put him in that starting rotation immediately. I think they're the favorites in the Eastern Conference. They might be the favorites even over Denver in a potential matchup there because he was that good. Like again, he was expected to have all these all-star expectations as an early draft pick, but that team was poorly coached. They didn't really reach that potential. They were good. He was good. And what happens? He gets traded to the Charlotte Hornets, and his ability to stretch the floor, put the ball down, is much more athletic, especially during that tenure with Miami. So I think he's be a great fit there.
Good pick. I am going with Sean Marion. I'm going to take Sean Marion with my second pick.
Oh,
Versatile defender. Didn't really shoot the three ball all that well with Miami, but I think he would shoot it better with this team.
yeah.
And you could play him on the floor. You could play him against anybody. I think the Heat would love to have a guy like Sean Marion as their starting power forward. If you're not going to go big with Whiteside or a big center plus Bam that slides Bam to power forward, go small. Sean Marion, you talk about the guys who have worked in Miami next to Bam, whether it's PJ Tucker, Jay Crowder. Like Sean Marion is that on steroids.
Yeah.
That guy is awesome. I think Spo has compared Caleb Martin to Sean Marion. So picture for Heat fans that don't remember Sean Marion, like some of our younger listeners, I guess, like Caleb Martin,
Wow.
but bigger and stronger.
Wow. Are we at that point already?
We are. That was
Wow.
2008.
I can't believe it.
It's more than 20 years ago.
He played for the championship, the Mavericks championship team, though. I mean, like he wasn't.
Yeah, he's a
I
little.
know that his Heat tenure maybe it was 2008. Yeah. I get it.
It wasn't the same.
He's
Give me-
certainly
give
not
me- give me
7
Sean
seconds
Marion.
or less version of Sean Marion.
That's true too. But he was
Wow.
closer to
Yeah,
that when
no,
he was
it's
at
a good
Miami
pick.
than
It's-
in Dallas. All right, your pick. One
Sure. My last guy here, another versatile player who I think we've talked about this in other similar exercises, but a guy who had this incredible skill set and in today's game would probably play the 4. So I looked at him as a great combination of size, speed, ball handling, shooting, everything else. A guy who probably is not very popular amongst old-time Miami Heat fans, but give me Jamal Mashburn, another guy who eventually became an all-star outside of Miami, and he was very, very good. Yeah, Jamal Mashburn, a guy who could score, a guy who could play. His defense concerns me, but I think with that skill set, I think he'd be really good. Like he might be one of Miami's better and more skilled players, like right away, if you put him into that starting lineup. And again, a guy who was underrated during most of his tenure. High expectations in Dallas, those didn't work out. He had some good seasons in Miami, those didn't work out, and eventually kind of thrived with the New Orleans Hornets, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
You went all 90s. Very on brand.
yeah.
All right. Give me Ray Allen.
Most of the role play. I was thinking about that.
Just give me Ray Allen. I need the shooting. I need the shooting. I don't know if Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson. I don't know what their whole situation is. I don't know when they're going to be back. Give me the best 3-point shooter available. Give me Ray Allen. He could step in. He could start filling those spots. He could space the floor for Bam and Jimmy. That one was easy for me. All right, so I got Hassan Whiteside, Sean Marion, and Ray Allen. You ended up with Rony Cycli, Glenn Rice, and Jamal Mashburn. Let us know in the comments, who do you think won the role player draft? That was fun. Maybe we could I feel like we could go another 3 rounds on that. Maybe we save that for another
Kelly Olynyk
episode.
I mean,
I had Kelly Olynyk written down. I
debated.
Let's not
debated
spoil it. Let's not spoil it. Let's do it again. I think we could do it again. We'll do round 2 of the role player draft when we another day when we're running out of things to talk about. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.